All righty. So here we are. It's Greg Iverson at Neighborhood Loans back, and I've got a special guest today. That it's working in the investment and the turnkey space so often. I've often thought one of the holes is not having enough accountability, guidance, coaching, things like that. I find that a lot of our clients, it's flip on the TV late night. Let's get some ideas there and let's roll with it. And I think that diminishes the likelihood of success, quite honestly, And so I'm super excited to have Boone on today, who incredibly involved in the turnkey space. But what I really want to talk today more about is the coaching that you do with clients. So with that, let's just kind of kick it off. So, Allie, who is the perfect client, or who do you work with that you find needs you and gets the most benefit out of your real estate coaching?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks so much for having me on here. I love coaching, and I wish I want to do more of it. Everyone's just busy buying properties, but the coaching, it's like it is. You're right. You use the right word. There's a hole. There's a gap. I feel like there's a lack of this. So I'm so excited to be able to work with people on it. So I work with a variety of people, but if I were to really kind of narrow it down, the couple categories that everyone really falls into. Number one, brand new investors. A lot of people Google how to be a real estate investor, and all they get is like this mass overwhelm of information, and they're left overwhelmed, and they're like, great, now I'm stuck because there's too much information. They don't know how to start getting traction. So that's one category, brand new folks, purely overwhelmed, or just really not knowing what the next step should be. Like, they're willing to do them, they just don't know what they are. The other category are the experienced investors. So a lot of the experienced investors, and I work with a lot of turnkey investors, but also non-turnkey. And typically what happens with the experienced investors is you're trucking along and things are going well, and then you hit an obstacle or a challenge or something happens. And, there's a few things that come from that. You really can't see the forest through the trees, and you're trying to figure it out on your own because it's kind of a solo sport, this real estate investing thing, and you don't really know next steps. So the experienced investors, what I like to do is really just kind of look at the whole situation with them, like lay out the puzzle pieces and how do we get around or above or whatever this challenge is to get to the next step. Or even that challenge may specifically just be a scalability problem. Sometimes it's a very logistical challenge. Sometimes it's just kind of more from a goal planning perspective. Like, you're going along and you're like, okay, this is going really well, but am I actually getting to where I want to go? Yeah. So then kind of similar thing as we lay out the puzzle pieces, get the big picture, and I can help sort through those things as an outsider, because again, it is hard to see the forest through the trees. So bringing in that extra set of eyeballs and, connecting different resources and just rearranging those puzzle pieces to make sure that you're in line for what it is you're actually trying to accomplish with all this investing.
And helping to drive that accountability too, and reminding them of their goals, I would imagine. It's so often like, everything's going great. You get 5 properties, you're having a blast, and then you hit that first hurdle, and it's like, okay, I'm out. This isn't what I and
like a concrete wall to the face.
I talk to so many, it's like, then they abandon the plan, and it's like, no, that's when you lean in, and really push through that, because that breakthrough might be like literally right on the other side. It's just you've got this hurdle to get up over. You really hit the nail on the head with, and you didn't quite go that far, but like with newbie investors, it's scary to me that, you mentioned Googling or you turn on the TV. I feel like there's always that ulterior motive. It's like there's always something to sell, and having an unbiased somebody in your corner that, is a coach or a consultant that, really the ulterior motive is you want to see them succeed, and in knowing that, I would assume, and I do some coaching in my business as well, it brings a tremendous amount of satisfaction too, and and it sharpens your pencil as well. But I think it's so rewarding when you see somebody have that breakthrough, that it's like, I was a piece of that. And when they called me, they didn't know where to go, or they ran up against this hurdle and were ready to quit, so that's huge. So just out of curiosity, like maybe just a couple of examples, I know we don't have all the time in the world, but maybe just a couple of examples of like you've got a seasoned investor or somebody that's bought, 3, 4, 5 houses. What types of things do you see come up that it's like, okay, they need me, I can help them work through that because I've been through that challenge, or I've talked to a lot of people that have before. What would you say those look like?
I would say if I were to come up with a couple that I hear a lot, one is you're doing whatever your strategy is, whether it's turnkeys or flips or whatever you're doing. And for whatever reason, you're wanting to pivot a little bit. That may be like if you're buying turnkeys, let's say the turnkey provider you've been buying through isn't really feeling like a fit anymore and you want a new one. Pivoting to a new source for the properties. And if it's flip, source of properties, regardless of turnkey or not, or you're wanting to pivot strategies a little bit. Let's say you keep buying turnkey and you keep having to put all those down payments down. You're like, well, I'm going to run out of down payments pretty soon. I need to pivot somehow in order to bring more capital. I need to some kind of pivot. Something is going along, but you need to change it. And either you don't know who those people are in order, who to turn to change the source of the properties or financing or whatever, or you're wanting to look at another strategy. Let's say you've been buying turnkeys and now you want to start flipping. Well, what are the basics? Like, what do you need to know in order to successfully do that? Again, you can Google how to flip a property and you're going to get a lot of information, but from an actual practical application standpoint, like what I would do in that scenario with you is, okay, if I'm going to start flipping properties, what are the things I would want to make sure that I have in place and I'm learning, the task list, if you will, and we'll develop that together. So you leave with like, oh, here's what I need. The other category would be the people who I kind of mentioned before, like an actual logistical challenge. Let's say they're going great in their strategy, but they've hit some kind of hurdle. An interesting one that comes up a lot is people are trucking along, they're flipping their properties, they're landlording, whatever they're doing, wholesaling even. And they're like, I really feel like I have all these passive income goals and I'm running out of capital. I'm doing all these active things. I have passive income goals. I want $5,000 a month in passive income. I want $10,000 a month. But here I am, like it's almost like their strategy and their goals are amiss. They're going different directions kind of thing.
Yeah.
And in that particular case, one thing that people don't expect me to say, if you have passive income goals, is possibly, depending on your situation, it's different for everybody, it might be a matter of growing your active income, because passive income goals require a lot of capital, more than a lot of the active things. So the trick is, well, you need enough capital in order to get the passive investments. So how do we get the capital? And it may be like, I have one woman, every 6 to 8 months, I'll get like an SOS text from her, like, help, need you, and then she goes off and does her thing. She's great for a while. And then she's like, whoo, need you. And I love hearing from her. And she has passive income goals. And she was just doing phenomenal at flipping properties, which is not passive. But we worked a lot on like, well, what if we came up with the numbers, like, what do you need in order to get these passive investments? And like, how can we accentuate the active income investing to hit your passive goals, which people don't, they're like, but I need passive. Well, yes, but it may require some active. Yeah. So that's another one that I was not expecting actually to hear so much of that one, because I hadn't really thought about it, but it's become a big one and it's been helpful for a lot of people. So and one thing I'll say, I have a mentor. I've had mentors. I wouldn't be where I am without mentors. And with the experienced investors, especially a little bit with the newer people, but especially with the experienced investors, it's so often, and I was the worst culprit about this, is they wait until they're dangling off the edge of the cliff, ready to fall, before they're like, help. And, like that SOS text, it's like a help. And I still am challenged with this myself sometimes. But one time I called my mentor, coach person, this is a long time ago, and I was just all up frazzled about something. I was like, oh, this isn't going to work. And like, I mean, it was really like, I was about to cut the whole thing off. And so we worked together and he was like, oh, okay, let's reel it in. We came up with the easiest solutions because he was an outsider perspective. I couldn't see through my own mess. And so we finished the whole thing. I was motivated. I was like, wow, this won't get such a big problem after all. So we finished that. And then he goes, hey, Allie, can I offer something? I was like, sure. He said, every time you call me, you're literally dangling off the edge of the cliff and just, fire the whole, he was like, there is the option to call me as you see the cliff coming. Yes. And I was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Like, yeah, I'm such an independent person. I solve all my problems and all these things. Like, I would try and solve it. And it wasn't until I was like desperate about to drop off the side of the cliff that I would call him. He was like, if you see the cliff in the distance, you could just call me then. He's like, what if we were to prevent you from dangling off the edge? I was like, profound. I hadn't thought about that. So that, now that I do a lot of coaching, it's the same kind of thing as like, there is a proactivity level to it. You had mentioned earlier accountability, motivator. It's not always just about having the answers to the questions. It's about having support through the whole thing, because that keeps you driven, it keeps you performing, and it stops the fear before it gets to a debilitating, or whether it's fear or being paralyzed, whatever it is, stop it before it gets there. So it's having that support in the shadows.
It's funny. I'm taking flight lessons right now, and like what I just heard you say
Have we talked about this?
We did, yes. I think we have anyway. But like what you just said, like I think of the perfect analogy, and it's like if I am calling my flight instructor when I've already crashed the plane, it's not going to work too well. If I'm in the air asking him, okay, how do I land this thing? I've got a lot higher likelihood of success, and it's so funny you say that. And I even talk to my team here about that. A lot of times it's like, the more time we have, the more options we have to fix it. When we're up against the wall, it's like, okay, we got to do this, this, and this, and we got to do it quick, Well,
and I love this analogy, obviously, because I'm a flight instructor, but I love this analogy for everybody, because like you gave the example of not waiting till the plane crashes to call for help. If you think, this is me having flight experience. If you're in the air and everything is going great and all of a sudden your engine stops, right? Despite what people think, you have quite a bit of time before you're actually going to crash. And in that period of time, you're troubleshooting, you're trying to figure out, you're making your plan. That period of time is exactly what I was talking about, dangling off the cliff. It's like you haven't crashed yet. Yeah. But everything, the thing to add to what you just said is that in that moment between the engine stopping and you crashing, you are so frazzled and so frenzied that can actually make it harder to figure out the solution. So it's like, if you can know the solution and practice the solution before the engine stops, that's that edge of the cliff that I was talking about, because that period of time when the engine stops, or you're dangling off the cliff, whatever analogy you want to use. Yeah. There's so many emotions. People can say what they want. There are feelings in real estate. Sorry. It's all about 100%. The numbers. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Keep going with that. So so like instantaneously, if your engine stops on the plane, everything gets busier. And so making a phone call in that case, to your coach, like, hey, I'm going to land. I have to crash land my plane now. You're not going to be calm about it. You're not going to be thinking rationally about it. And quite frankly, that phone call is going to add to your stress. So it's like, don't even wait until the engine stops to learn, so you have someone with you the whole time. You don't have to spend time making that call. I realize I just put a couple big analogies together, so that may have been completely chaotic. I love that analogy.
It relates so well. And it's so true, like forecasting what's going to happen down the road. And oftentimes you can't see it as the investor, as the one doing it, the way that Allie can, or the way that I can, step back.
And also too, like if you know things that may pop up. This was a huge thing for me when I started my business. I had read every Robert Kiyosaki book on the planet, not really even just for the real estate stuff, but for the entrepreneur stuff. So when I started my business as an entrepreneur, when these inevitable challenges hit, because Robert Kiyosaki said, by the way, this is going to happen. By the way, when this happens. So when it happened, it didn't seem like I had done something wrong. And I was like, oh, he's said this was going to happen. And it
Yeah.
was so much
It's a matter of
easier for
time.
me to deal with. Yeah. Versus like being shocked and completely taken aback by, oh my God, what's happening? And, you know,
Yeah.
taking that shock value out for sure.
You're so right. And talking to somebody that says, yeah, hey, by the way, I knew that was going to happen because I went through the same thing. And that's natural.
Yeah.
You're not failing. You're
Yeah.
actually succeeding. And part of succeeding is you're going to have those mistakes. You're going to have those things happen. You know, this has been
just
super valuable.
to add one little thing on that is like when
Yeah.
someone has more experience than you, because this happened with me with my coach back in the day. I had this one rental property I bought, and in the first year, it had like a 10-month vacancy period. I don't even remember why. The property manager was awful. And so now I had this property, I'm paying a mortgage every month. And I was just like, ugh. I was like, this property is terrible. And so I went to my coach and I was like, or mentor, whatever you call him. And I was like, I think I have to sell the property. This thing's not profitable. And he was like, wait, tell me more. And I was like, okay, here's what, there's no, you know, I'm paying the mortgage and whatever. He's like, the same guy who picked me up off the cliff. He's like, I hear you. He's like, but do you want to humor me for a second? What if we actually map this out and look at the profits? And I was like, well, there's no profits, but sure. I do what I was talking about. So we actually mapped it out. And what I had bought, where I bought it, when I bought it, all these things, because rental properties don't make money in just one way. They make money in 5 different ways. We can dive into those in another podcast or another recording. But when we actually mapped out all those profit centers, even without that cash flow and me having to pay the mortgage, that property had been stupidly profitable. I was like, wait, what? And so sometimes it's about having a more experienced perspective of, yes, I hear you, but let's actually look at this, because how we see things all the time isn't necessarily indicative of what's really happening. So having that outsider's view is a huge one.
It's so good. And I literally talked to a client last week that was going through an eviction. Actually, it was 2 properties, eviction, having definitely some challenges. And that's exactly what I said. I said, well, what's it worth today? And he said, 180,000. I said, okay, you bought it 2 years ago. What'd you pay for it? 130,000. Okay, so of all that, each of these properties has gained 50,000 in equity in 2 years. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. And through no fault of his own, he's got his head down, the blinders on, and it's supposed to cash flow every month. And if it doesn't cash flow every month, it's not working. Yep. But fortunately for you and I, not being right there in the middle of it, can easily say, well, here's the benefit. No, you're like winning this game. Like if you go tell your friends this story, they're going to think you're a wizard, Yeah. And oftentimes it just takes some centering or just another standpoint, or somebody else's outside opinion of it, or view of it.
And that's a really good example to come full circle on something you said a little while ago about how when someone's trying to sell you something, intentions can be masked. You don't know who to trust. It's like, well, they're trying to sell me this. If you don't make any money one way or the other if this guy keeps the property or sells the property. Exactly. Like you get nothing from telling him that. There's no motivation for you to convince him that he's profitable, because someone trying to sell something, they're going to convince them. You have no stake in the game. Same with coaching. You pay me an hourly rate. What you do with what I give you, that's on you. And I don't make a commission. If I convince you to sell this property, I make no money on that. And so I feel like there is a inherent comfort in knowing that the person you're talking to in your support system literally gets nothing out of, I would like the repeat business, but it's an hourly rate. It has nothing to do with what you do with it.
Yeah, it's like having a board of directors, that ultimately, you want to see their success. And in turn, that means they'll hire you years and years and years down the road, Yeah,
and I think, one thing I want to say about like how I coach is, because it ties into exactly what we're talking about, is the way that I look at it. I'm like your driver's ed teacher. Like I have an emergency set of brake pedals in case you try and drive me into traffic or something. But other than that, you're driving the car. I'm just kind of like, hey, take a left, take a right. Don't forget that stop sign. Might want to brake a little sooner. I'm really just offering the guidance, and it's up to you to implement it. And the reason that I set it up like that is because like the how-to guide, the people trying to sell things, like here's how you flip a house. You need to do this, 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 and this, or here's how you this industry, more than any industry I've ever known, if not the only industry, there's no one way to do any of it.
No one
There's a
size
million
fits all.
different strategies and there's a million different ways to do it. And I think my personal take on it is the only way that you're going to be successful is if you figure out how to do it specific to yourself. That's why, like, have you ever seen one of the gurus or anyone hand you the 10-step guide and be like, here you go, and someone's followed it and had the exact same success?
No.
Never. It doesn't happen because everything has to be tailored. So I'm not going to tell you what steps 1 through 10 are. I'm not going to tell you how to flip a property. I'm not going to tell you how to do any of this. What I'm going to do is work with you for us to figure out the path together. And I can, like, if you just want to buy a turnkey rental property and you're super overwhelmed, you're like, I don't know what provider to work with, I don't know what market, that gets a little bit more step by step, but I'm still guiding you according to your situation, because your situation is going to be completely different than the person I talked to previous to you. And so I just really want to highlight that. And that's how I work, because it does go back to what you're saying is there is no how-to that can be handed to you. And that is a lot of people's frustrations, because they're like, oh, why can't someone just tell me how to do this? Because there's a million different ways to do it. And none of them are going to be exactly what is going to work for you. I don't want you to take somebody's 10-step how-to guide, because it's not going to work for you. Parts of it may, and a lot of it might, but you have to be willing to make it your own. So that's my little soapbox that I just jumped on.
No, I love that. Like, and I think it's
that way.
100%. And markets are different. 2023, as we're filming this, is different than 2018, and
what resources and capital you have starting out is totally different
100%.
Than somebody else. What your passive
100%.
income goal is different. It's everything, which I think makes this industry incredibly complicated. But at the same time, it's also a very unique, you can make this whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
It's not a cookie cutter type of thing. And some people wish it was. Sometimes I wish it was. But it's not. But that does give you more opportunity down the line to be really stinking successful, because you made it your own. So that's why I'm like, I'm in the passenger seat with you. I am along there. I'm going to save your life if you're getting us in pickle. But, you are driving the car. This is your car.
It's so true. And I think that's the perfect wrap up to why hire a coach, honestly, because I think you need that navigation and you need somebody that understands that there are a lot of different ways to do it. And there are a lot of different people and different personalities and all that at the end of the day, Yeah.
Just remembering too, that like a lot of people want to save every penny or save every dime. It's not a one-to-one comparison. If you pay me an hourly rate, the exponential return financially that you get, this has been my experience hiring coaches, is what I pay them, I make back tenfold because I did something more efficiently. I got a better deal. I avoided a big pitfall, so really looking at it, because it's like I hear people all the time not wanting to pay a property manager the monthly fee to manage the property. So they're going to landlord and save $100 a month
and lose thousands.
Yeah. And all your sanity, all of it.
Yeah.
Or that's me hating landlording, but yeah. So I just want to throw that last little blurb in there too.
I could go on and on all day, especially about the flying piece of it. But for the sake of our listeners that want to get in touch with you, can we wrap up with the best way to reach you? What's good contact information for you?
So my email address, you're always welcome to email me, Ali, A-L-I, @hipsterinvestments.com. And you can go to hipsterinvestments.com. We are on the brink of launching. I didn't even think about this before we recorded this. I'm like, if you go to the website today, depending on when you see this, you're going to see the old website, but you can go on there and subscribe to it, and you're going to get the notification. The new one's about to launch. It's going to have tons of properties. It's going to have a ton of information about coaching, all of that. So just email me or go to hipsterinvestments.com and contact me through there, and I'll talk with you for sure.
Awesome. I love it. All right. So Ali, A-L-I, @hipsterinvestments.com. Catchy name, which I love. Or hipsterinvestments.com. New site coming very soon.
Yeah.
Probably by the time.
And also too, worst case, reach out to Greg and he knows my information.
Absolutely.
So
you know where to find me.
We'll find you for sure.
Ali, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Take care.